All right, so how does this dynamic grid thing actually work? Okay, so basically we have the root rectangles, which we discussed in the previous video, and we also have the golden section rectangle. Okay, for this demo, we're going to stick with the root rectangles. Now, what you want to do is based on your content and your intuitive layout that you did, you're going to determine what type of rectangle fits that perimeter. Okay, so basically we'd be going at something like this and saying, okay, so if I laid out a bunch of stuff, okay, I'm going to be bouncing back and forth between these drawings, so just work with me here. What you do is you first start out with all your content, and say you're designing a complex multi-page document, and you're going to have many spreads in this document, and so you got a lot of content. You could have a lot of pictures, a lot of text, other elements, and so you have to figure out how you're going to lay this all out. So what you do is you find a spread that's got a reasonable amount of content, certainly more than average, and it might even be possibly the busiest spread that you have. And you then lay everything out and just throw it out there and just, okay, here's the stuff that's going to be on this spread. And then you start to lay it out intuitively, okay? So then once you lay it out intuitively, you decide, well, what shape is going to be make the perimeter the most logical shape. And in this case here, I decided that it would be a root 2 rectangle. And that is what's known as a parent shape. Okay, so that's my perimeter. I can't go outside of that. And then I have to look at my design and I go, well, how could I divide that shape? Could I divide it vertically or could I divide it horizontally? So in my case here, I decided I was going to divide it vertically, and I chose a square as my second shape, which is now my primary rectangle. So I have a parent shape and a primary rectangle. So I'm going to bounce out of this for a minute, and we're going to talk a little bit about how you think about working with building this grid. Remember, it's a dynamic structure. So you go back to your root rectangles, and we decided that a root 2 rectangle was going to be our parent shape, and a square was going to be our primary rectangle. I'm going to copy those, and I'm going to put them into a new document. I'm going to paste them and move them up into the corner, and then grow them proportionally. Okay. So in my case, I had the square over on this side because that's how my division was going to be. Now, think about it this way, is when you've got your parent shape, your primary rectangle must hit 2 corners, okay? Has to hit 2 corners. It can't be something like floating inside. It can't do something like that. It can't do something like this. It has to hit the corners, 2 corners, okay? Must. Otherwise, you'll destroy the structure and the integrity of the dynamic shapes, okay? So, now that we've got our shapes, I'm going to go to my layers, and I am going to lock that layer down. And I'm going to make a new layer, and this is where my guides are going to be, okay? So I'm going to call this grid. Okay. So now I can't move these around because this is important, because as we start monkeying around with stuff, it gets crazy. All right. So these are the primary structural divisions that you're going to make as you start to work with this. We have, yeah, I know, I got that. We have the diagonal of the parent shape. We have the I'm going to change that color too. Let me change that color to something like teal. Okay. All right. And you have the same diagonal here. Okay. These are what's known as primary diagonals. Okay. You also have a primary diagonal between the primary diagonals of the primary rectangle. Okay, so we have these diagonals. And you have the remaining space that's left over and these are potential. You don't necessarily want to draw all these, but these are the first things that you want to do. Okay, these are all your primary diagonals. Okay, that's all there are. There ain't no mo. Okay, so the primary diagonals of the parent shape, the primary shape, and the remaining space that's left over. Okay, now, so once you have these diagonals, and you can, I mean, since these are so dominant, you can probably draw these into your grid right from the start. But then after that, you want to start being careful because you can draw lines that you may never ever use. This is where the intuitive part comes in. But that's being said, I'm going to rename that primaries. And I am going to lock that down. Okay, and I'm going to make a new layer. Okay, now these are going to be my first generation divisions. Okay, these are created by the parent or the primary diagonals with the parent or the primary shape. Okay, I'll show you what that means in a minute. And we're going to call these primaries. These are going to be called, first generation divisions. Okay, so we're call this first gen. Okay. And these are created by the intersections of primary or parent diagonals with primary or parent diagonals. Okay, so this is a primary division of space, right? Because this is the primary rectangle. All right, so now you can use guides or you can use lines. So I'm going to use guides just because it's easier. Okay, so, and I just turned on my rulers. So you can start by pulling things out, right? This is a very strong first generation division. Right here is a very strong, first generation divisions are just strong, period. Okay, so they're just like the strongest possible divisions of space. The diagonals are not actually part of the structure. They're only construction diagonals. But once your grid is built, the diagonals go away. Okay, another primary, a first generation division is from these two primary diagonals. You pull that down, that's one. Then what's amazing is, right, you see these two and all of these are all the same. Okay, so that's a first generation division. And then of course we have the one just below it from right there. And then we have another intersection here. Right? We have another one here. And then that's it for the horizontals. We can see we have a gap up here and we have a gap down here. Then you want to bring in your verticals. Okay, so we have a primary right here. So that's a first gen, very powerful first gen vertical division. We have another one right here. And actually, let me move that up a little bit. That was a little bit off. There we go. And then you got this one there. Notice they are both the same there and there. We have one here, we have one here, and we have one here. Okay, so if we were just to build a dynamic structure just as it is, that would be what we would end up with. Okay? So that's a pretty good grid all by itself. But we have a big gap over here, and we have a gap up at the top and at the bottom. And we have a small gap over here. So we might need to look for further divisions in space. So what you do then is you start looking for a primary diagonal with a first generation division. Okay, so these are all first gen divisions right there. And that's a primary diagonal. That is what's known as a second generation division. Okay, we've just done all of our first gen. So now I'm going to lock that down and I'm going to make a new layer and I'm going to call this second gen. And then I'm going to start looking for further divisions. Okay, so anytime a primary diagonal crosses a first gen division, gives you another good strong division. Okay, so now at that point, let's see, I'm going to make my guides a different color for here. Let me think here. What am I doing? Preferences, guides and grid. Now I want my guides to be a different color, so I'm going to go with kind of an orange color. Okay. Okay, what? Huh? Okay. Never mind. Okay, so, oh, they're all going to be the same no matter what. Oh, it so sucks. Oh, well. So at this point, we are going to, like I said, we're going to start looking for our second generation divisions. All right. So now we have one here. That's the only horizontal one we have. Notice here it crosses there. That gives me a third gen. Okay, and that starts to get a little bit weaker, but nevertheless, we'll go with it. And then, let's see, a vertical. We have several. Actually, I'm going to undo that for a moment. If we're looking for... Actually, I'm going to do lines now in this second gen, and I'm going to use a... Let's try green. Okay, I'm going to start using lines now. I want something a little brighter than that. Brighter, brighter, brighter. Okay, now we're good. All right, now I'm going to start using colored lines because all my guides are orange. So if I'm looking for a vertical, I have here, cancel. I have here, I have here, I have here. Okay, these three are going to be the same. Okay, so these are three possible vertical divisions. As I go through, again, you want to be careful about not stratifying your grid too much, right? If you have too many lines, it starts to get too convoluted. So you really want to be careful. Like, I wouldn't find one here unless I absolutely needed it. Okay, so I'd let that go. And as I go through here, I've got multiple, really. I've got, if I wanted to divide this space right in here, I have that possibility. I have this possibility. And that's about it, right? Because these two are the same and those two are the same. Same thing happens over here. If I'm looking to divide this space up, I have this and I have this, which is the same as here and here. Okay? Actually, let's see. I got that, I got that, I got that. Okay, so we got three. And if I'm going horizontal, I have this division here, and that's pretty much it. And then anything else at the bottom, I'm going to have the same thing down here. Okay, so as I get into my, let's see if I turn that off. Yep, okay, those guys go. All right, perfect. So if I need to divide that space up, I have that possibility. And then I'm going to use my option drag. And I have one here. And I have one, let's see. This is how you start hunting. You start hunting, you go, oh, there's one right there. And then you start hunting for another one. You go, oh, there's one right there. And then you go, nothing in there, nothing in there. There's one right there. Wait a second, I screwed up. Okay, so I got one here. Notice it hits all of these diagonals. And this is how the harmonic symmetry starts to work. You start to see that all these diagonals end up creating modules that are really cool. And then you go back and you go look for another one. And anytime you see anything cross, you have a possibility there, and you have a possibility there. Okay, so that's the second generation. These are by far the strongest, and so oh, there's one more I missed. One more, I missed it right over here, right there, right? Okay, so if at all possible, you'd want to stop there. But every once in a while, you need to do something where you need, for example, a headline or something at the top, and you need to find an alignment for that. This is where you start getting into the third generation divisions. After that, I don't recommend going any further than that. And so, so now I'm going to make another. I'm going to lock that down, and I'm going to make a new layer, and I'm going to call this third gen. And these are all the last opportunities for finding subdivisions, of which there's almost always going to be a bunch. Okay, so for example, if we're looking for a horizontal, I've got one here, I got one there, I got one here, I got one there, and I got one there. Okay, so any one of those are a potential division of your space. And then if I was looking for something at the bottom, I'd have exactly the same thing, because these are symmetrical designs when it comes to top and bottom. And so those would be my subdivisions. Over on this side of the game, I still don't really have anything. If I needed something over here, it's just not there. So I'd probably have to go looking around for a strong intersection of a second and a primary. So these are my secondary, my second gen divisions, right? So if I needed something down here, I'd just have to go find that here, okay? And so then I would draw something down here like so. That would be a possibility. There'd be a possibility there. And this is what I call hunting, you know? And there's one right here, okay? And there's one here, okay? And the same thing happens up here at the top, okay? So that is the way you build a dynamic grid. But like I said, I mean, you could certainly just throw this grid out onto your design and you could make it work. So that is a possibility. But in the next video, we'll talk about how to do this intuitively.